So, what do you like about your grandpa?
Okay. What I love about my grandpa is how caring he is and how thoughtful he is about literally anyone and everyone. Even just a random person he's met for the first time, like he'll care for them 100%. But I just love how he always just randomly will call me, and I love seeing Grandpa Jack on my phone and just being able to pick up. And I know he's just asking me how I'm doing, how my life is going. He just really cares about his family and everyone. And I just love getting those phone calls from him and just knowing that he wants to know what's going on with my life and just cares about how I'm doing with everything. Okay, what I love about Grandpa Jack is just his random phone calls I'll just get throughout the week. I love seeing Grandpa Jack show up on my phone and just picking it up and him asking how my day is going, what's going on in my life, and just how much he cares about me. So an experience I have with Grandpa, I just remember in high school I got a few speeding tickets and I needed to pay one off because my parents were really mad. So he was the first one to tell me that he would give me work to do so that I could pay it off. So I remember coming to his house and having to clean every single window, inside and out, but I did it because he was willing to help me to pay off my ticket.
I love a lot of things from my grandpa, but a few things that stand out to me are like that he always calls me and then asks how I am, and he always offers to like put me to work to get money for college and everything, and then he always like cares about anyone and shows the same amount of love for them that he's known for the people like for years. He'll show that love to anyone, whenever and whoever it is, and that's what I really love about him.
Awesome. Tell me one special experience you've had with Grandpa.
One special experience I've probably had with Grandpa Jack is him always asking like a Sunday dinner, always asking like what I'm doing that week and how sports are going and how my games went, and that's one of the things that I really like about him and like talking to him about. Sunday dinner as well, he always like tells me how like smart I am, and then he'd give me like random equations and I just do it in my head, and then everyone would just be so surprised because he'd like go and like check his calculator and I was right, and that always made me feel really proud of myself, made me feel super good. So that's what I really like about him as well.
My name is Alexander Nixon Berenson, and I'm Relinda's son, youngest son. So I actually work with Grandpa Jack now, and growing up, he was always really Christ-like, and I think everyone always knows that. Everyone will say that same thing, like you mentioned, but he was always just a peacemaker, and if you always had a problem, you could always go to him. And just growing up, I'd say that's probably one of the number one things I remember is if there was ever a problem, we could always go and talk to him, and he'd always make you feel better. I don't know how, but he could like appease you in some way to make you feel better or encourage you in some way. So there's that side, and then just growing up too, he would always tell these same stories, and I feel bad now because when I was younger it got to a point when I was like a teenager, I'd dread driving around with him because he'd take me to all these properties and he'd tell me the story about the property, and the conversation or the car ride always ended up being 3 or 4 hours. And so anyway, I have a lot of memories of that. When I was younger, I have a lot of memories of him in his Lincoln, and I was little, probably like 7 to 10 years old, and I remember we would drive up behind this subdivision that he was building behind our house, and he would go, I would think that he's gonna stay on the road, and he would take this big old heavy Lincoln and he would start climbing like a 35-degree hill, and I remember I'd always put my seatbelt on, try to hurry and act like I wasn't scared, but I was always terrified. And somehow he'd always make it up on every single time.
Really?
But he's as scary a driver as my mom, that's for sure. But those experiences I'll always remember just because they were always entertaining. And I think looking back, I regret that I dreaded some of those times. Even though he told me the same stories and he showed me the same properties probably 5 times, it was still great, and it was still a great experience. And every single time I learned something from him. So 3 words to describe him.
Yeah.
Meek, humble, Christ-like. Some of those are similar, but so a recent memory that was really funny and fun is we took him to Bear Lake with the jet skis, and he wore sandals with socks and these shorts that were way too big. Anyway, and my wife Cammie asked him to go on the jet ski, and I suggested that I take him on the jet ski, but she's like, no, I don't trust you. You're gonna throw him off. Well, about 30 minutes later, they come back, and she had thrown him off. And she told me later, and when he got back, I was like, are you okay? I was really worried. And I guess the ranger actually came over to make sure that they were okay because he saw him from a distance. And he had struggled to get back on the jet ski. And I was like, are you okay? And he's just looking at me, he's like, son, I am just fine. He's like, that was the greatest time I've had in a long time. He's like, my blood's flowing and I feel great, and that was the greatest time. And so I just was like, okay. And anyway, I just kind of laughed it off, and later I asked my wife, I'm like, how was he? What did he say? And I'm like, wasn't he really scared? And she's like, you could tell in his face when he was in the water that he was really scared. And that he was actually kind of nervous when we were riding on the jet ski because I started going fast. And she's like, but the whole time he's like, oh, sweetheart, this is so much fun. I love this. And he was just like a little kid. So anyway.
I know that you work with them, so tell us some experiences about that.
So everyone talks about how Christ-like he is and how he helps people, and I knew that he had helped tons of people. Something that I don't even think he really knows. And he may know now. I actually sit in the office behind him, and in that office, I can hear everything in his office, even when the door's closed. Sorry if you've been in that office with him. And like I said, we've always known he's Christ-like, and that, obviously that's all, and that he's helped a ton of people. No one really knows that. Like, no one really knows to the extent. Because the conversations that I have heard, he helps more people than I ever imagined. And it's financially, and it's counseling them, and it's helping them. And so I would say, I don't want to get all emotional. My mom said I get all emotional. But I'd say, if you think you know how much he has helped people, you have really no idea. Because it extends way, way farther beyond that. And the conversations that I've heard, I mean, I've learned a lot with him from business and things like that. But I have learned so much more from just listening. And I think that's been a huge blessing to me. And I don't think that he knows that or understands that. And he probably never will. But just being allowed to work with him, it's not necessarily that he's actively teaching me. He's actively teaching me in his actions with other people. So that's been a really cool experience. We had just gotten out of a meeting, and I was frustrated because we have all these people that don't pay rent or that owe us money. And so I was just venting my frustrations to Jack. And like I mentioned before, I sit behind him in his office, and when that door's closed, I can still hear a lot of the conversations that go on. And I said, look, we can't just let these people live in the homes for free. And if these people owe us money, they got to pay, because we've got to be able to operate the business. And immediately after, there was someone that showed up to the office, and I could hear the conversation. And I just had gotten out with him, and we were frustrated about not getting paid on all this stuff. I had no idea who this guy was, and he started explaining that he needed some money and some cash just to get through the next couple months. And I immediately was like, look, here we go again. Jack's gonna give somebody else this money, just some random person, I have no idea who it is. And I'm like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And I was tempted to just like go in there and be like, what in the heck? What are you doing, Grandpa? Anyway, he immediately says, okay, how much do you need? And the guy said, I think he said something, $3,800 or something like that. And I hear Jack, no hesitation, shuffling through his filing cabinet, and he starts, and I'm guessing he was pulling the money out. And he says, here you go. And he says the guy's name. And I was just like, oh my gosh, here we go again. Right after he hands it to him, he immediately says, how is your daughter? And so he immediately hands the money and immediately says, how is your daughter? And so I was all frustrated again, thinking, oh no, Jack's just gonna give someone money again. And the man responded, and he said, she's doing good. That's exactly what this money is for her, so that we can pay for her insurance to get through the next couple months. And he said, I'll have you paid back in 60 days. It's not a problem. I just need to get through these jobs. And right afterward, Jack immediately follows with, how's your wife? And he says, are you going to church? And is she going to church? Are you guys? And he's checking on their church and their church attendance and how the rest of the kids are doing. And they continue the conversation. This guy leaves, and I go into his office after, and I just say, I was like, Grandpa, who was that? And he explains the guy's situation, and that he's lent him money before, and he's paid him all back, and he helped him get started in business. And then he started talking about his daughter, and he started explaining the disabilities that his daughter had, and how if she didn't have insurance, basically they couldn't even take care of her needs for the month. And every day she has to have someone that comes in and cares for her, and the insurance covers that. And so anyway, it just made me feel horrible, because I was like, here I am frustrated, and I'm like, Jack's just handing everybody money and helping everybody out, and we don't even know what they're doing with it and all this other stuff. And it made me just take a step back and say, look, Jack really does know what he's doing, and he is helping these people, and he does know the story behind it, and he knows their needs, and it just gave me a whole different perspective to that. And so I thought that was pretty amazing, and it made me look at the situation completely differently. Over the past couple years, I've gone through a situation where I have basically had to pull out of a business and that I put everything into, and I was so busy during that time, and he would call me, and it wasn't often, but it was always at the worst time, when I was struggling the most. And I almost didn't want to talk to him because I didn't want to get emotional with him, and I didn't want him to think that I was struggling. But I would call him back, and I would just vent to him and tell him my situation and what was going on. Every single time, it was like he knew. He just knew when to call. And I feel bad because I try to avoid it sometimes but I'm just like, how does he know? How is he in tune? And sometimes I was frustrated with it because I'm like, every single time he calls me. And after I'd gone through this process of winding my business down and that, I've had a lot of conversations with him, and I had one that was really, really special, just because you could just, and he was crying, and you don't see, I've seen him cry, but he basically just, in the conversation we talked about everything, and I was talking about my frustrations and my disappointment with everything and how I didn't know what to do. And he just looked at me and he's like, listen. he's like, you've got Nixon blood in you. And he was crying, but he's like, no one knows the pain that you're going through and the stuff you're going through. He's like, but your Savior does. And he says, I've gone through things and no one knows, but my Savior knows. And he says, and I've depended on him. And he said, he goes, every time, and I just see him saying this, I don't know why, but he's like, every time I'm stuck in the mud or I'm drowning in the water, he lets me get to the point where I think I'm done. And every single time he reaches down and he plucks me out of there and he turns me around and he just said, you just rely on him and you're going to be just fine. And he's right. He is right. And every time he has been right, and every time he's been there when I've struggled or had a hard time. When I just had gotten home from my mission, and I think this is genuinely just funny because it's ironic that I'm working with Jack now, but she's like, well, what are you gonna do? What do you know what you want to do? What do you want to go to school for, or any of that? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, maybe I'll come work with you. And he's like, you could do that. I'm like, and then I said something. I was like, well, what are you gonna do with your business? What's gonna happen? I mean, is someone taking over? And he's like, I don't know. I'll probably just get rid of it, or I'll probably sell it or something. Like, I can't remember what he said. And Charlotte looks up at him and she goes, well, Jack, what if Alex wants it? And I'm like, he's just gonna give me his business anyway. It shows her. Both Charlotte and Jack they're so generous and so giving and so thoughtful of everyone else, and it just showed anyway. It was just a funny moment, and it's just funnier now because now it's like the position that I'm in is I probably am going to take over and help manage. I'm helping him manage all of the business and that, and so anyway, it's nothing that we initially wanted or planned or whatever else, but it's just ironic that Charlotte said that funny statement forever ago, and then now I'm being more integrated into Jack's business and helping him. Jack is always positive and always thoughtful, and I would say he's always encouraging. I don't hear him speak really negatively of anyone. And you could do something, people have done horrible things to him, he will not speak negatively of them. And that's a trait that I just think is incredible. So we'll meet people on a daily basis, and they'll say their name, and I will be like, okay. And I go back to address them and I forget their name. We'll be in a conversation with them. Every single time, Jack will remember their name. He goes back to them and he will say their name directly every single time. We'll come across people that he hasn't seen for 20 years and someone's kids or something like that. And he'll say, oh, that's so-and-so. They arrive and I'm like, there's no way he remembered their name right. Every single time, their name is perfectly right. I have no idea how he memorizes names or how he has the memory that he has, but it's insane.
Just share some special experiences you've had with your grandpa.
Oh man, there's lots. I think I'm pretty blessed in the sense that I get to work with him every day. Not necessarily side by side, but to call him my boss and my grandpa, that's pretty lucky, right? And he's such a great boss. I think one of the best things about that part is the fact sometimes he's missed a couple paychecks, but almost every paycheck, every stub I get has a handwritten note from him. And it's just telling me how appreciative he is of me and how good I'm doing and how much he loves me. And I've saved actually every single pay stub that he's given me. And I've saved every one of my pay stubs that he's given me with all his little handwritten notes, and I just love to keep them and read them, and glad I have
If
them.
you could describe Grandpa Jack in 3 words, what would it be?
Thoughtful, generous, and loyal.
How has he been loyal?
I just feel like he is so loyal to his family and anyone that comes in contact with him. Like, he would do anything for anyone. And I know no matter what, like, I can always go to him and he'll be there and he'll help me and he'll give me advice, and he's just so loyal to those that love him and that he loves. So I have lots of favorite memories with Grandpa Jack, but some of my favorite memories are when we go on like grandpa-granddaughter dates. A lot of the times after my grandma passed away, he didn't have a date or a +1, and so I kind of filled that spot a couple times, and he'd always treat me just like A1, like the best of the best. Open my door, tell me how beautiful I looked over and over again, say I was the prettiest girl in the room, and just show me off to all his friends. And I loved going on dates with him. I love that when my grandpa has a thought in his mind about one of his grandchildren, whether it's just like, I wonder how they're doing, he'll give them a call. It's not just something he thinks about, he's active upon it, and he'll call me. And if I don't answer, he'll call, or he'll leave me like the cutest, longest voicemail. And I actually save all my voicemails too, because I love to go back and listen to them and hear his voice. And I just love that when he thinks about us, he calls us and asks us how we're doing, and he's just super thoughtful that way. My Grandpa Jack is super spiritual and is, I feel like, so close to the Lord. And so when he has that inspiration to call one of his grandchildren that need him or need his just conversation, he'll call them, and it's the best thing. My fiance Alex, he's super close with my Grandpa Jack as well, and he gets phone calls weekly almost, just to see how he's doing summer sales and with wedding planning and his thoughts and his feelings, and just checking in. So I think with giving advice to his grandchildren and those he communicates with, everything is super inspired by the Lord and promptings he has, because every time he gives us advice, at least for me, I feel like there's always some spiritual example or thought through that. And so I think his spirituality comes through that way, and it's super special. Growing up, we got lucky because we lived so close. We lived just not even 5 minutes away from Grandma and Grandpa Nixon, and so Sunday dinners was what we always got the perk of. We got to come over here for Sunday dinner and have Grandma Charlotte's meals. And since she passed, my mom's kind of taken on the role of being the new Sunday dinner cook, and so my grandpa and Trace get to come over every Sunday, and that is like, we're so lucky to have them with us each week and get to talk with them and eat with them and just spend more time with them on Sundays.
What have you learned from Jack?
I think what I've learned most is just to be hardworking, obviously. Always work hard for what you want. Be smart with your you know, your finances and your choices in life, and also just being so generous and thoughtful to those around you. I try and always think of like how I treat people I don't even know, because my grandpa Jack would treat the most, I don't know, a stranger like his own, you know, child. So it's like I try and be that way towards people that I may not know, and be more thoughtful of their feelings and wants and needs. So one of my favorite memories with Grandpa Jack is riding with him to USU basketball games and sitting with him, and him always putting his arm around me and whispering to me, and his crazy driving to the game. You know, you never knew you were going to get there safely, but we always did. I've always had a good time, so that was something I really enjoyed with him.
I just love how generous Grandpa Jack is. Before I was even, I guess, really even a part of the family, I flew home to surprise Janessa with a wedding ring, and I didn't have a car, so he handed me the keys to one of his Jaguars and said, go propose to her. So
Wow, that must have been fun.
it was, yeah.
Describe Jack in 3 words, what would it be?
Generous, genuine, and thoughtful. Always just been there with a listening ear and giving me and Janessa advice on how to start a relationship off on the right foot. He's always taken us to Aggie events. He even gave me a job when I was just going bored out of my mind with nothing to do, with not going to school and all that type of stuff. So he'll even call me on the phone, and me and Janessa aren't even married yet. We're getting married in about a month, and before he hangs up, he always goes, I love you, my boy, and it means a lot. He's an amazing guy, and he's someone that I'd love to aspire to be someday. He's just an amazing guy and someone I really aspire to be like someday.
Hi, I'm Cammie Berenson, one of Jack's granddaughters.
Who's your mom?
Oh, you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
So, Relinda and Brad Berenson.
Describe your grandpa in 3 words.
Okay, giving, very, very giving, genuine, he's so genuine, and loving. He's very loving. I've always felt his love for me and my whole family.
What do you love most about your grandpa?
I love his phone calls. He always calls. I don't even know how he remembers, but he always calls me to check in on me, and it always seems to be at like the perfect time when I need to talk to him, or when I need his counsel or something like that. He always is calling and checking in, and it always made me feel so loved. One thing I love about Jack is he always brings light to every party. He's always happy. I've never seen Jack where he's not happy. I never have not seen him happy, really. And I love that, you know, you can go to him about anything. I think every grandchild or every family member calls Jack when they really need some good advice. One thing that I have always loved is how supportive and encouraging Jack is. He has always been at so I graduated, so I got my doctorate degree and I graduated, and he came to both everything. He's always there. Whenever I picture something that was really important that happened in my life, like the biggest, most important moments of my life, Jack has always been there. Always. I mean, every child that we've had, he's always been right there after. Every baptism, every blessing, everything that's important that might not even seem important to some people, he's always there. So it's funny because when I look back at all the important, you know, parts of my life, Jack is always there. I always see him there next to me with his smiling face. Recently, so I nannied for a family that Jack's really close to, the Dunkley family, and I saw him recently, and he told me this story, and this is so Jack, if you know Jack. So 2 funny things is they were leaving a Utah State basketball game, and all of a sudden they see literally this man skipping down the stairs, like during the escalator, like skipping. And then as they got closer, they're like, it's Jack! Of course it's Jack skipping down the escalator. And then he told me, so David has always gone to Jack he's a very wealthy man, and he, how to disperse his money. He always wants Jack's advice because, Jack's really good at that. Like, you're someone you come to for advice. And they were leaving Century 21, and Grandpa Jack tripped and did a whole somersault down the stairs, like a full somersault. And this was like, he's 89 years old. And he just popped right up, like didn't even faze him, and was like, whoa, like, oh, I missed a step there. Like, had the biggest smile on his face. And if being in healthcare, for an 89-year-old man to fall and literally do a full front flip down the stairs, it's just amazing. Like, we worry about femurs breaking and killing people, but not Jack. Nope, not Jack. So, literally, stairs, and it's just not one stair. It was a whole flight of stairs that he flipped down, and we were like, oh my gosh, but not Jack. He just pops right back up at 89 years old, like, oh, whoops, I missed a stair. It's amazing. He's Iron Man. Seriously, Iron Man. Jack is a very faithful Aggie, Utah State fan. So he never misses a Utah State game, football, basketball. He can be seen, you literally can see him skipping around, the sports, whatever sport, activity that's going on. So I think, and I'm sure he donates lots of money to the alumni. So yes, he's a true blue Aggie. He bleeds blue. Another thing when I think of Jack is how much he loved Charlotte. From when Charlotte, I think of Jack constantly opening her doors and, what's the matter, sweetheart? Can I get this for you, sweetheart? And even now, so something that's really sweet that I'll share is, so I worked for a hospice company for a long time, and the director, Cody Johnson, he told me that he lives just down the street from Jack, and he says almost every night on his way home from work, or constantly, he sees Jack talking to Charlotte's grave. And the cemetery is really close to here, but he goes there daily and communicates with her, and I think he misses her dearly, and his love for her is just so strong. Cody, the clinical manager of the practice, he says, I literally see him every day on my way home from work, talking to Charlotte, talking to her grave, and he said it's really sweet. Jack and Charlotte have the sweetest relationship. Jack's a little on the wild side, so I remember whenever being in the car with them, it would go something like, Jack would be driving a little too fast, and I could just hear Charlotte now, Jack, slow down, Jack, slow down, and it wouldn't even faze him. He's just like, okay, sweetheart. They were really, really, really cute. I always saw Jack and Charlotte together. When she was living, they were never apart. Charlotte always had these amazing trips planned, and they were always together holding hands, just cute. They're like the old couple that you see in movies that you're like, I want to be like them. That's definitely how I felt every time I saw those two together. As a nurse, I worked hospice, and then now as a nurse practitioner, I do care visits, and I'm always amazed because I see these patients that are, 10 to 15 years younger than Jack, and their quality of life, is barely hanging on. And then I always think of Jack, almost 90 years old, still going to work every single day. His memory, he remembers everybody, everything, like enough to check in on. And it's not just me he's checking in on. He's checking in on, I'm sure, hundreds of people, no joke, on a daily basis, like beyond his family. And so his mind to be this sharp and his quality of life, I mean, I hope his genes are in all my children. Jack has 5 kids, 16 grandkids, and I can't even think right on the spot, but 30 plus great grandkids. And he literally is calling in and checking on them daily. Like, I think if you asked anyone, they would get, daily for some, weekly at least, calls from Grandpa Jack saying, hi, sweetheart. How are you doing? Do you need anything? Tell me a little bit what's going on. I don't know how he remembers at 90 years old and that's just the family. there's neighbors, co-workers that will tell you this, that constantly are getting calls from Jack to checking in on him. I get the chills thinking about it, but I really think he's led by the Spirit, and he's an instrument in God's hand sometimes, because there's definitely been times in my life when he's called and I'm like, oh my gosh, I really needed that call today. So it's amazing.
He's really thoughtful and nice. Me too. This $2 bill.
Awesome.
Sorry.
He's really nice. Grandpa Jack gives us very good advice. 'Cause he's so nice. I like him 'cause he always comes to my birthday parties and dance competitions. And he helps us. That's what I like about Grandpa Jack.
Say, I love Grandpa Jack so much.
Well, thank Grandpa Jack. I got it. I love Grandpa. He's the best.